Welcome back to How We Love. Joining us from Paris, our guest today is the writer Talia Carner. Talia has not only written 6 acclaimed novels, but also 50 award-winning short stories, articles, and essays. Though recently widowed, she had a deeply loving marriage with a blessed family, and as youthful and beautiful as she has grandchildren to boot. To say that Talia Carner is a woman I admire is an understatement. Hi, Talia. I'm so glad that you were able to join us.
Thank you so much for having me on your show.
So, Talia, let's start. You're so accomplished. You've done so many things, and we're going to have 2 episodes. You're going to come back and speak with us again about your marriage. So let's start with your early years. Your family of origin, where you grew up.
I grew up in Tel Aviv. At first, early years, just outside it, but then I moved to the center of Tel Aviv.
That's
Those
in
who
Israel.
those who know Tel Aviv, it's Rothschild Boulevard, the corner of Mazie. It's the hottest spot today. And I still have a lot of friends from my old neighborhood. Yes, and that's where I grew up. I was a tomboy. I like to climb trees, and I still like to climb trees these days. I
Are you
teach my
kidding?
grandchildren how to climb trees.
You climb trees with your grandchildren?
Yes.
So, what kind of a family did you grow up in?
My parents got divorced when I was young, and my mother remarried to a man that I thought he married her only because he wanted to be my dad.
So he
He and
married
I
you just
took,
because he wanted to be your father?
yes, because that was my childhood idea
Oh,
of
your
how it was.
fantasy.
Because the moment I met him, we took to each other so much. He was a 40-year-old bachelor who married my mother. And yes, of course, he loved her and she was beautiful and all of that. But immediately he became my father, and he was a very, very loving father. And I have an essay that I wrote about him, how he was an intellectual, and I was a kid who had a lot of questions to ask. So I drew the best out of him in terms of, now I understand as an adult how fascinated he was with this kid that dropped into his life. So yes, he was a fabulous father to me.
And what happened with your dad?
I didn't like him. That was just a story. He remarried, but I didn't like him. I'm now friends with a couple of his children from that second marriage. They are my siblings by choice, because when you become an adult and you meet them and they are fabulous, you have a choice. So when I met my sister Mickey, I had last seen her. She was 9. I met her again. She was 36. And I decided, wow, I can have her as a sister. So we're close now.
Oh my goodness.
Yes. So,
So,
yes,
let me ask you something. Was divorce common back then in Israel?
no.
Yeah, I would have thought it was rare. Did it make you feel different?
You know, my mother told me that I should not be ashamed of it. So I was talking about it all the time, all the time. And only when I was about 12 years old, and I was visiting a friend, and she always said about how her father worked in Haifa and he never came. And I realized that her parents were divorced, but she never admitted to it. And I realized that she was ashamed of it. I never thought to be ashamed of it, so it didn't bother me.
I see. And how big a family did you grow up in? How many children were in your family?
And so actually, we were two girls when my parents got divorced. And then my mother and stepfather had another child when I was already 14. So she was a kid. She was only 4 when I went to the army at 18. So I had little to do with her, really.
Let me ask you about the army because let me tell you, I've interviewed and I know hundreds of thousands of people, but to be honest with you, I've never known one woman who was in the military. So what's it like to be in the military?
What's the name of that film about it? What's her name? Horn.
Goldie Hawn?
I'm
I'm
sorry.
not sure. I'm not sure what you're talking about.
Yes, yes. The actress
Goldie Hawn?
Goldie Hawn, and she's a private Benjamin. I think it's the
Oh,
name.
that movie. I never saw it.
Well, what the she hates what she has to go through, basic training, and I hated it too. I just hated it.
What is
And
it? What is basic training?
well, they wake you up at 2 o'clock in the morning. We were a barrack of 50 girls. That's just basic training. A barrack of 50 girls, and they tell us that within 5 minutes, all the beds have to be made and completely and aligned, and every blanket and has to be aligned and completely done. And we have to be dressed and outside and with our shining shoes. So that was one type of nonsense.
It sounds awful.
Yes. The other nonsense was, yes, we learned to use the weapons and take it off the Uzi and undo it and put it together, knowing that we were going to be secretaries and we never ever would have to use it.
I
But
didn't know that. I didn't know that.
but
So hold
yeah,
on, hold
so
on, hold on. I want to ask, hold on. I want to ask you a question. I didn't know that. I thought that when you were trained in the military in the IDF, you actually fought along with soldiers. So you're saying that the way the women were treated were different from the way the men were?
that's absolutely a myth. Today, now, which is decades later, there are women who are tank commanders, who are who are airplane pilots in the Air Force. At my time, not a single one. It was just they believed that it will do something to your uterus if you do this or that. Something. It's like all kind of myths were running around. But anyway, we were going to be in support positions no matter what. And
Ah,
we were.
yeah.
Yes.
So
So
how
no,
long?
no,
How long?
absolutely no fighting at that time. It's a myth.
But do you have any interaction with the male soldiers?
Oh, yes. Once I finished my 1 month of basic training, I was sent to some camp where I worked in the office. We were about 6 people, probably, or 7, and probably three women, 4 men. Yes, we worked with them for the rest of my military service. They
And
were others.
how long were you in the military?
2 years.
2 years. Was there a war on at that time?
Yes, there was. And we
Oh,
worked very, very hard. It will date me if I tell you which one it was.
I-
But I can
well,
only
no, it
tell
won't
you,
because nobody's going to know. But which war was it?
and I cannot, it will date me.
Oh, okay. Just tell me what country Israel. Well, Israel is always at war. What country?
What do you mean, what country? All of the Arab countries. Every war was in with every one of the Arab countries. No country ever stayed, Arab countries stayed aside when there was a war against Israel.
Let me ask you, what is it like to live in Israel when there is a war going on?
That is very scary. That is very, very scary. And what's happening now? Now there's an active war going on because while they were talking about maybe peace talks with Iran, the Hezbollah, which is armed by Iran, is still continuing in the north. So there's a war, active war going there. In Gaza, there's still stuff going on because Hamas is still in power and they are suppressing and killing their own people, which they have been doing for decades.
I understand that, Talia, but I'm asking you on a personal level, what was it like for you to be in a country that was at
It
war?
was very scary, but while I was in the military service, I don't remember being scared during the war. But there was another war when I was not in the military, and I was very scared.
All the time.
It's hard to describe fear. Fear is not an emotion that's easy to describe. I know that as a novelist, when I try to describe fear for uh, any of the characters, what you need to do is show sweaty hands, shaking back or arms or something, or pounding in the head. It's in writing, I have to describe it as physical manifestations. I don't recall it as being physical as it is in the heart. And it's there. It's just a heavy stone that's filling the heart, the
Oh.
whole chest. That's how I can describe that, the emotion.
And when did you leave Israel?
I left in 1974. That's
Why did you leave? Why did
50
you leave?
years ago. I was young and I thought, I was going to come to America for a while. It was fun. It was wonderful. And let me give you a background. Two of my mother's sisters, her oldest and the youngest of 6 children, had moved to the United States. My oldest aunt lived in Beverly Hills, literally in Hollywood. And she had this one of those amazing houses. She would come and tell me, and I remember when I was 11, she told me that her children, who were 1 and 2 years older than me, had an ice cream machine in the basement. And all I wanted to do is come to America and have an ice cream machine. That was 11. And so that was one end, and I would get the dresses from her daughters that would sent to me, and I loved my dresses. I realized that now that my love of clothes started then, and I would actually, I actually knew how to change, because my cousins were even as skinny as I was. They were skinny and very tall. I knew how to hem. I would starch the dresses and I would actually wear crinolines under the dressers going to school. I have schoolmates who still remember me in dresses with crinolines. So
You must have been the only girl dressed that way, correct?
of course, I was the only one, but I love those dresses and I had a lot and I knew how to handle them, how to take care of them. So my other aunt lived in Park Avenue, in one of those apartments where the elevator stops right in your own apartment and opens.
You had two wealthy aunts.
Yes. And later on, when I was still young, I had a friend, the Duchess Christina Paolucci. And she was
I'm sorry, explain that again.
her name, she was a Duchess, Christina Paolucci, I think her name was, if I pronounce it right. And she was an Italian nobility who lived in New York. And she also had an apartment on Park Avenue. And she was quite older and she died young. She died in her 40s. But my view of America was between Hollywood and Park Avenue living. And this ice cream machine, I outgrew the desire for an ice cream machine, but not for a lot of other things that I could get. But my aunt in New York actually arranged for me for a scholarship in Columbia University, and as I was coming out of the army, I would be going to New York, except that I had a boyfriend, and he said he wasn't going to wait for me for 4 years. So I still have, my aunt gave me the letter in which I tell her that I can't leave the boyfriend. So that's when I ended up going to the university in Jerusalem for my undergraduate, and then
So you didn't leave. You didn't leave for the ice cream. You stayed for the boyfriend.
well, ice cream machine started at 11. The
But you
boyfriend
stayed for the boyfriend. What
appeared.
happened with that boyfriend? You didn't marry him, did you?
No, I did not. But at that time, a lot of my friends married young, a lot,
Well,
like
you
20.
must have been in love or deeply infatuated to have
I
stayed.
don't know. He was my boyfriend for 5 years, so it was in Israel. The whole idea of boyfriends at the time, and maybe I cannot speak about today, there was very serious relationships. We were very serious. If I had to go to the doctor, my boyfriend came with me. If it was just a very responsible relationship, not between kids.
How did it end?
Uh, he didn't want to marry me. He decided that we were 21, I think. And he said he was too young when all of our friends got married at that year, the year before, the year after. And he said he was going, and so our parents, both sets of parents, told him that if he was not going to marry me after 5 years of dating, he should let me go. So actually, he went shopping with me for new clothes because I was going to go into the dating world.
You're kidding me.
Yeah, I tell you, it was like having a parent.
Let me ask you something.
He got married at 40.
Let me ask
Eventually,
you
he got
something.
married
No,
at
no, no.
40.
Let me ask you something. Were you heartbroken?
From the idea, but we actually were bickering a lot, a lot, a lot.
He
So
was doing what a lot?
we were bickering,
You were fighting.
fighting a lot, a
Oh,
lot. And I now know it's had to do with questions of control, and I was too independent. I didn't understand it at the time because of male, female positions in society. I did not understand that I was rebelling against certain things. So if I was better than him
he
in
was
some
domineering.
areas,
He was
I'm sorry.
domineering.
I'm sorry.
He was domineering.
Yes, he was domineering, but I took it as it's okay because a boyfriend, a man is more important. But at the same time, I was better than him in some areas, for example, writing, and he could not accept it. So there were all kinds of areas that I can't even remember what. Okay, so I can't remember. I just can know that in hindsight, it was just very, very good that we did not get married. And by the way, I see him sometimes because those years he became best friends with two of my cousins. So eventually, even after he got married, sometimes when I visit Israel, I see him. It's
Well,
it's okay.
knowing what you know about love, because you had a truly loving marriage, would you say that you were actually in love with this guy, or were you just dependent on him and attached?
Probably both. I think I loved him. I
So
think I loved him,
you
but
had the chemistry.
I
Hold
was
on,
not.
hold on. You had that chemistry with him.
Oh, definitely,
Oh,
definitely.
okay.
We had a very strong chemistry. He was very good looking. He had a magnificent voice, which I learned eventually that I always love fabulous voice, that men have great voices. He was tall and blue-eyed and very handsome, yeah, and he was had a very strong charismatic personality at a
Oh my
young
good. So then it
age.
was not such an easy breakup.
But then he lost his charisma as he in later years.
But when
So
you broke up, he still.
not then, but as I'm saying, because I had the chance to see him because he remained friends with my cousins over the years, like decades later, I was less and less impressed with him and happier that I didn't end up with him.
So when that broke up, is that when you came to the United States?
Yes, more or less. Yeah.
What do you mean, more or less?
There was some, I started working in advertising, and I became actually a very successful account executive in one of the major advertising agencies, again, at extremely young age. But what happened was that when I started as an assistant to the vice president who was running some accounts, a major account. Carmel Wine is the largest wine and liquor company in the country. And then he was called into the army for reserve for 2 months. So those 2 months, I continued to work on the accounts, and I got the client to approve all of the upcoming campaign for the new season, the new year, all the artwork, all the schedule, everything. So when my boss came back and he saw that this account was managed so incredibly well and it was done, he gave it to me. So then I got other important accounts because I was doing so well.
And when you came to the United States, right, did you get involved in marketing then?
Not immediately. I first had a very hard time with HR people understanding and believing. Like my other account was Fabergé. I introduced Fabergé to the Middle East. It's hard to believe, but Iran was a friendly nation, Cyprus, Turkey. So I was introducing Fabergé to the Middle East. And when I came to the United States and told human resource directors who were interviewing me for a job that that's what I'd done, they either didn't believe it or they did not, were not able to see how one experience meant that I was very capable of doing something else. And I never
Didn't know what
forget
to
this
do with you.
one question that an HR director, a woman, asked me. It was because for Fabergé was a side company that had a lot of toiletries. And so she asked me, I said about a client, I was interviewed for a particular account in the toiletry business. And she asked me, I said, yes, I did all of this, toiletries. She said, yes, but did you do soap, bar soap? Did you do a bar soap? And I looked at her like she was an idiot. I mean, but for her to ask me that stupid question, that I did not have a bar soap in the toiletry business that I was running. So yes, so I had a tough time. Eventually I did
You
get,
know, it sounds like they didn't know what to do with you.
right. Eventually I did get a job with a promotion agency. I needed to have a local US base experience on my resume. And at that time, my accent was also much stronger than it is now. So that would kind of also had a tough time with that.
But you
So
did go on to work for some pretty prestigious magazines like Red Book and Savvy Women.
that's soon after. So I moved. So as I'm saying, I needed to have a New York, US based experience. So I joined a small promotion company, but it did for Colgate Palmolive and those companies. And I got that underway. And from that, I moved to my advertising sales of space sales, and I loved it. I absolutely loved selling advertising space in magazines.
Why was that?
I just enjoyed it. And I learned again, that I had the brain for marketing in a way that it was unusual in different ways. First of all, I was able to understand every industry of every client that I was soliciting an advertising page. I was able to talk to them about their industry. And so advertising directors, marketing directors, they were all impressed with me and they bought from me. The other thing is that when I studied at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, I studied psychology and sociology. But actually, what I studied a lot within those two departments was statistics. And I was very good at statistics. So now I'm in New York, and every time I look at the marketing, I ask for the research departments to provide me with the data was there. It's a matter of asking the computer to spill out the information in a way that's creative. So I would do that and was able to find marketing trends where they non-existed, now understanding on insight. A very good example is a Red Book magazine, our reader. So that's when I moved. The reason I moved to Red Book magazine is my clients put me there. They were the ones who were giving me their references.
You were telling me about how in some way you began the concept of the baby boomers. Could you go into that, please?
When I studied at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, psychology and sociology, I also, through that, I had to study statistics a lot. And that sounds like the most boring subject in the world, but it's extremely important for marketing, I found, and especially once I came to the United States, it served me very well when I looked into marketing trends and industries, overviews. One of the things that, as an example, I worked for Red Book magazine, where I was selling advertising space, which I love to do. And I requested from the research department to pull out data. We had data that was being studied every year, all of mostly US population as a sample with a lot of specific questions. So I asked them to find out for me how women 18 to 24 today, this is back in the early 1980s, how are different they are from women who are 25 to 34, 35 to 44, and so on. And I came out of that, what was generated was that the specific question that I asked were, have you written a letter to the editor this past year? Now, I didn't ask the question. The company that did this national studies was always asking those questions. Nobody was probably asking to draw those figures. So we take that. Did you write a letter to the editor? Do you participate in a PTA? Have you been to town hall meetings? And so on. And I found that these women were much more civic oriented and active in society than somewhat older women, and even older whose focus was on the kitchen, bedroom, maybe living room, and maybe garden. Some of those magazines I was with Red Book, those other 6 were targeted towards somewhat older women.
So the targeting was more women. Let me just get this straight. So the targeting was more for women in the home. And so you began to understand.
Those other magazines were targeting the women in the home. Ours also targeted, because my editor, a 60-year-old man, Cy Chesler was his name. He was a good editor, but he was a 60-year-old man who was telling young women and new mothers how to manage their lives. So the focus was on their home and parenting and so on. And I pulled out, we already knew that the younger women at that time were marrying later started by 3/4 of a year, that maybe a year, maybe postpone the birth of their first child by another year. And that's where it was already known. What I found was those characteristics of the female baby boomers. Until then, just because they married a year later or had a baby a year later did not mean anything other than those statistics. But now we understood that this was a different generation. So the definition of the baby boom generation females was mine through the fact that I was at Redbook magazine. Now I could go to IBM, and they had a Selectric typewriter, and say to them, you are advertising in Forbes and Fortune to the CEO. But who is the one who's buying typewriters? Who tells the office? It's the secretary, it's the office manager, it's the woman who's now has a part-time job, maybe at a law office. She's the one who tells her boss what kind of a typewriter to write. So she's now your market. I moved that market from one place to this place where women were now considered a market, not just for diapers and for some stuff for the kitchen, new olive oil, but rather for products that define the baby boom generation.
Wow. That's, oh my God, that's awesome. That is awesome. You get a medal for that.
Thank you.
Oh my goodness. Well, let's move on because we're going to run out of time. So I want to ask you something about going forward. You started getting involved with African women. Could you talk about that? Because that's pretty awesome. Why you did it and the subject matter itself.
It really came about this. I must say that was a very marginal part of my career. After Redbook, I became a publisher of Savvy Woman magazine, which is a magazine for executive women, exactly because the sense that I understood the women's market in New York better than most people. So that's why I ended up jumping very, very fast into the magazine publishing as a publisher, and that's a business job, not editorial job. At the time, there were only 4 females running among the top 200 magazines in the country. So for me,
you were one of them.
Now I became one of them. But again, because of my understanding of the women's market, it started with that, and there were other things along the way. But this is all a matter of, we're talking 5 years, all of this. So I now left Savvy. I had ideas of how to reach the top of the pyramid of the women's market. That's meaning the women who lawyers, accountants, engineers, bankers, women who were professionals and were earning their own money. And I had an idea how to do it, and no one else had those ideas. So I opened my own marketing firm called Business Women Marketing Corporation, which I ran for 9 years. Every single consumer product company at one point or another bought into my programs because no one was able to reach the top of the pyramid at all, and I delivered it. So by doing that, running my own company, and I didn't mention that I went to Stony Brook and got my master's in concentration in economics. So my education was really in economics and the statistics I mentioned to you. So now I was running my own business and I understood entrepreneurship. So I became a volunteer for the Small Business Administration women's programs in New York. And that is, as I'm saying, as a volunteer, running sometimes workshops, sometimes one-on-one counseling. And I wasn't the only volunteer. There were a dozen of us, maybe. But at that time, there were no books about entrepreneurship. So I had to write my own material. And among the, sometimes we got groups to come to study with us. So that's when I had a Japanese come, I think, and I think, oh, sorry. So then in 1995 was the International Women's Conference in Beijing, and I went there.
In China?
To China, to Beijing in China. And I went there and I was invited to sit on economic panels and to teach entrepreneurship to women in some workshops. And while I was there, in the first day, I was shown a video of clitorectomy.
What is a clitorectomy? Can you explain what that is?
Cutting the clitoris. In African countries,
say that again?
Cutting off the clitoris.
Cutting of the clitoris.
Yes. In African countries and some Middle East, the idea is that women should not have a clitoris, and they would make them unmarriageable if they did have it. So,
in other words, hold on, because the clitoris was the source of pleasure?
Yes.
Sexual pleasure?
Yes.
Okay.
So, there are 80 million women right now in the world who had been cut. And
who have been cut, who do not have a clitoris
cut, clitoridectomy. That's what it's called.
Oh my goodness.
So that custom is there and exists and continues to this day. And I must tell you, there's some immigration that comes to the United States from Somalia and some other countries. They continue to do what they call it a nick. They don't completely cut, but in order to, it's like a custom to just nick the clitoris of babies. So anyway, the
whole point, hold on a second. The whole point is that women should not have sexual pleasure.
Yes, because then she's not, that's the idea. Women should not have the pleasure. And actually, yes, at that time, this is the campaign that I helped develop. At that time in Egypt was considered the more advanced country within Africa, and the other African countries and governments looked up to Egypt. So Egypt Minister of Health was a gynecologist, and he declared that made clitoridectomy legal and performed in the hospital instead of in the field where women were cut and sewn together with thorns and packed with ashes until they hopefully one day healed if they didn't die from infection. So he said teenage girls should not wear synthetic underwear because it will make them crazy. So now we have Egypt, that the other countries are looking up to, legalizing clitoridectomy instead of stopping it.
Oh my God.
Women from Africa, I met these women who were activists who were trying to stop this horrific custom. And as I'm saying, it was done mostly in a field with rusted shaving material stuff,
lousy equipment.
And there was a lot of women who died, and you heard about the problems, for example, with fistula. It sometimes is because they sew it so tight that the woman in childbirth, other parts of her are torn. So the damage, the internal damage for women is incredible, and the pain for life and other things. So there were activists, African activists, who were trying to stop it. So I helped them develop a campaign. They did not want Western countries involved, because the idea that if the Western countries come with their own customs and try to impose their Western ideas, then they're going to be rejected. But if the women, the African women activists would do that from internally, from the different countries, each working with her own government, then it's more likely to bring change. And I must say that it hasn't yet, and the phenomena continues. But that was my part of my activity. And then I mentioned entrepreneurship. Sometimes we get in New York, we would get groups that would come and we give them workshops, but also in Beijing, I did that for, I don't know, the 10 days, 15 days of the conference. Yes.
But you were also involved in China with something with their sex trafficking. Am I correct?
China, sorry. Repeat the question.
Were you not involved in China in something that they call the dying rooms? That was their sex trafficking in Chinese orphanages?
There are two separate subjects. Sex trafficking I dealt with in South America. In China, there was the infanticide of baby girls. In 2000, actually just before the 1995 International Women's Conference in Beijing, the BBC released a video, a film, a documentary called The Dying Room, in which they showed babies actually being killed, dying in those Chinese orphanages that were really meant to kill them. And then
are you telling me that they were murdering babies?
Of course. They were murdering baby girls in different ways, either at home, okay. And Pearl Buck, the author, who in 1930 published a book called The Good Earth, she tells how during Great Famine in China, when a baby was born, they smothered her with a pillow to kill her. We don't see infanticide like that in Africa when there is a great hunger, okay? So murdering baby girls in China was as old as China. But we're in the 20th century, and we had different sensibilities. So after this film, the Chinese government said to the world, what do you want, world? You told us to control population, our population growth. So that's what we're doing. Infanticide in China was as old as China. And with the numbers gathered from the Chinese government, the world, realized in 1995 and moving forward that there is a huge discrepancy between the number of female babies born and male babies born. Many were done through official abortions. Many were done through infanticide. And once the world starts screaming about it, the Chinese government changed at least its transparency about it. I ended up actually presenting my findings later on, again, statistics, at the UN in 2007 at the the Commission on the Status of Women. It was the first time in the history of the UN that infanticide in China was presented. And that presentation, by the way, is on my website. And the way I got to that is, yes, it started at the International Women's Conference in Beijing in 95, where I began to learn about it. But then I did my research and ended up writing a novel, because by that time I had already started to write fiction, but the world didn't know that. The world knew me for my entrepreneurial skills and economics knowledge and so on. So I started to write fiction. I changed careers and closed my business in that year, and now devoted myself to just writing fiction.
And what
So
was your first
eventually,
novel? What was your first novel?
my first published novel was a published novel. There were others. There was one that didn't get published, but I used the material later. The first was a Puppet Child, which is about a mother fighting the legal system to save her daughter from the, so to speak, justice when the child was being abused and the legal system was not sexually abused by the father, and the legal system was not helping her. So it's not about as much child molestation as it is about how our legal system fails children and mothers who come seeking help. Then came, again, by order of publishing rather than by writing, came China Doll, which was about infanticide in China, but it's really the fictional stories about an American pop singer on a concert tour in China when a baby is thrust into her arms and she decides to keep the baby. She learns about what happens to the babies in orphanages, but both the Chinese and American governments are in cahoot to take the baby away from her because of the huge bad publicity for China. And that's the part of the story. And that's how I got to infanticide.
Hold on, because we're running out of time. We're going to have to stop. What I'm just astounded at is where in the world have you had the time? By the way, I just want our audience to know that you were also married and raising children. Where in the world did you have the time to do all of this?
I don't know. I just did. And I must say,
How?
I had an extremely supportive husband. Extremely. He was more than carrying his weight. I would say probably more than I did in some areas. For example,
How many hours a day when you started writing novels? How many hours a
not
day?
just, yeah, I used to write 16 hours a day, but also when I worked in my marketing
Did you just
company.
say 16 hours?
Yes, 16 hours a day. I could write for 16 hours a day. But also when I was running my marketing company, I was working 80 to 100 hours a week.
Oh my
So, and I also
God.
was traveling. I was traveling to see clients, and I had a lot of Detroit, the car companies were my clients. I would travel to Chicago. I traveled every week in addition. So even if it wasn't active working, I was not home. And so, yes, I just did it because I was young and energetic, I guess, and I had the drive.
No, not everybody. I was young and I was energetic, but I can't imagine writing 16 hours a day and having a family. It's almost incomprehensible. But we're going to have to stop now and we're going to continue with our interview once again to get into your marriage and your romantic life with this fabulous husband that you had and your children. So let's stop for now and we will continue in our next interview. I just want to tell you something. I said it at the beginning. I am awed by you, and I'm a woman that's been around the world many times. You are one of a kind.
Thank you. Thank you.
No, don't thank you. I want you to just say to me, I'm right. You know it. So thank you, Talia Carner, and we will be speaking again.
Thank you very much for having me on your program.
Bye.
Bye.